Couple of lines. And start again with the Nefesh Abami's discussion.
Good.
Closer to home, huh?
Right, I can relate. I missed the intro. So.
All right, so we're in the middle of the page, Nuntes, the line begins ha-naal. At the end of that line, so we discussed from the Avaya Echod, which in his bonus it actually means that there is that the inner holocaust has not been displaced in any which way by the creation at all. It hasn't changed at all. And therefore the creation is totally bottled. And the nefesh holokis is capable of relating to this reality. But this is exclusively the nefesh holokis, where gashmiyus is not necessary to identify with the Matthias, with presence. His whole presence is in your holocaust. Now we're going to Nefesh Abami. But the Nefesh Abami is Eino Ishayach Leherges Zeh. Has no connection. He is not capable of this hergish. The Iyar Achdas Havaya, where the principle of Achdas Havaya, the unity of Havaya, Shiyah B'chinas Bitul Mamash, that he should be in total Bitul. Now, this in a cycle hergish zeh, this is important for us to understand. We're constantly emphasizing this. We're not talking about that which can be explained logically. That you can explain even the Nefesh Abam is because this is a sechel principle. But no matter how much it's explained, a piece sechel, it does not become the reality where the Nefesh Abamis actually functions. It still functions at the worldly level, because that is the only thing that he can actually relate and sense its presence. To sense the union from Beetle Mamash, to sense the union from Avdas Havaya, and on a personal and a realistic manner, rather than just a logical proof, that the Nefesh Abamis is not capable. The Aved of the Nefesh Abamis, and thus the Aved of the Nefesh Abamis, who the Pasul Baruch Shveik Makus Eleilam Baruch. It is not in Avaya Echod where he is only aware of the Lakus, and that is the reality. But the Aveda is in the Pasuk Baruch Shem Makus Eleilam Baruch. And what does this Pasuk state? That we recognize Shem Kavod Malchusa, the name Kavod Malchusa, the glory of his kingdom, of his royal presence, in the form of Hashem, the name, as we explained many times, that the Melech is present everywhere, and that presence is called Hashem, it's called a name. His name permeates everything, and wherever you turn, this is the melucha of this king. And in that manner, everything is incorporated with the king. So even though the king may be in his palace, it does not diminish his presence everywhere. Because the whole materials of this melucha is due to the fact that there is the melech in his palace. And his name encompasses and embraces everything that's in his Melucha. This is the Aved of Nefesh HaBahamis. One more line and then we'll be able to discuss it. V'hainu, which means to say that in the Nefesh HaBahamis perception, it is Sheha'olam hu b'bchinas mitzius, that the world is in the realm, in the state of mitzius. Mitzius means it's not bittul. How do I relate to the world? I relate to the world because of its tangible presence. But v'hainu, and that is, how did this mitzius come about? Mitzad ha'or ha'elokis, due to from the perspective of ha'or ha'elokis, of the godly presence, shebo alidei ha-tzimzum, that comes through the tzimzum. This ha'or ha'elokis, we explained many times, ha'or and oir. Oir is the actual presence of the moir. Ha'ora is the reflection of the oir. What does it mean, reflection? Ha'ora means the functional effect of that oir. That's called ha'ora. Like we always say, and we already learned this, we always say that there is light and then there is the effect of light. The effect of light is that you can see objects. Seeing objects, that's not the essence of light. This is the functional effect of light. This is where light struggles with darkness. Makes it possible to see objects. But in reality, light is a godly creation, equal in terms of reality as the darkness itself. That's why the light was created and it had to be separated from the darkness, because light and darkness are of equal reality on a godly level. But what is the functional element of light, as we see it in the world? It's just that you're able to see objects. That's only the function. That's not the reality, the real aim of light. Because seeing objects means that essentially you are in the dark, but you're able to see just like you can touch objects, you can see the objects. That's called ha'ora. Ha'ora elokis is a similar thing. Ha'ora elokis is the pshat that you're not relating to the godly presence itself, but there is the effect of the godly presence. The effect of the godly presence, this is due to the tzimzum. And from that perspective, the Nefesh HaBahamis can relate and recognize the Metzius of the world. The reason I went back to it again because I wanted to elaborate on this principle. The Nefesh HaBahamis, as we discussed over Shabbos, the Nefesh HaBahamis is a living entity, is a nefesh. The principle of a nefesh. Step back a moment. If the only way that the Nefesh HaBahamis knows of the Metzius of the world is via its physical experience, that's not a Nefesh knowledge. That's a Guf knowledge. And therefore, if it's a Guf knowledge, even if you're convinced and you have that experience, it does not really touch your Nefesh. It's not a hergish in a Nefesh, it's a reality in a Nefesh level. I have been proven that if I do this and this, I'm going to get hurt. Therefore, I'm not going to do it, just like the animal. animal doesn't know that there is a world. Animal only knows what experience he has in the world. That's not knowledge of the reality of the world. The nefesh habahamis, the human nefesh habahamis, has sechel. It actually knows he recognizes that there is a true presence, a mitzias. To recognize that there's a true presence is only possible if it comes from a lukus, from a true presence. Not that I discover it because it happens to be there. So therefore, the nefesh habahamis also knows the world because of the godly reality. Because that's reality. Godly presence, that's reality. Except the nefesh habahamis does not relate to the godly reality per se, from a godly perspective, but from its effect. This is called the ha'or. Godliness is real, and therefore whenever godliness is present, it can create a presence. That's only ha'or. This is the ha'or of the this is the effect of the godly presence. But without the effect of the godly presence, just from the perspective from the experience of worldliness Allah itself, this is not even nefesh habahamis. This is not real knowledge. Not a hergish. As nefesh habahamis recognizes that there is a world. You have to understand, this is important to understand, nefesh habahamis, as we said, also has sechel. Sechel is the pshat that this is real, not that it's being forced upon you. The behemoth does not have sechel. And therefore the behemoth, the only way the behemoth learns, quote unquote, about its behavior is by reaction to the physical, by the physical reaction. Like we have mentioned many times, an animal you train, a human being, a child, you are mechanech. It's not training, you're mechanech, you teach, and you give him a sense of what he's doing, and he recognizes what he's doing. Because it's real, because the life is real, and the world is real, and that's why you can actually correlate. He says, see, in this world, this is how you're supposed to behave, and he recognizes it. An animal does not have such a sense of the reality of the world. And therefore the animal, you cannot say, when you in the world you're supposed to behave this way. It doesn't make any difference. There's no way to communicate that reality, that reason.
So why is the nefesh habahamis called bahami if it's so far away from just animal identity?
Because relative to the enushim, relative to the godly, it's bahami. Bahami is the pshat that it, like I say, it does not relate to godliness per se. It relates to godliness as it is affected by God. Godliness substantiates the mitzias of the world. But primarily, he can know what reality does he relate to the world of reality, mitzias. But how is he able to relate to the world of reality? Why is it real? Because there's ha'or elikis.
Yes, what about not too long ago we had in Chitas that a person has to do avos olam, his bonus, but Avi Rabba, it comes from the Maila. So the nefesh habahamis can have appreciate elokus in itself, not because the effect like avos olam. No, that's wrong shot.
No, that's nefesh elikis. It can be brain.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yid has nefesh elikis also.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
So this is a very important principle. That's why I'm repeating this as as many times as necessary, that it should register.
If you're not relating to the godliness per se, why does it matter to how to act in the world?
Sorry?
If you're not relating to the godliness per se, why does it matter to you how you're acting in the world?
The world is reflective of a godly quality, or entities. There is truth to the world. We had this discussion. I once asked a group of boys that were in the house, and we discussed it many times over the years. The question was, what would be your reaction to the thought of the world dissipating into nothingness in one instant, without any without any suffering as a result? This world just dissipating into nothingness. Is it a tragic thought? Or if since nobody suffered, then nothing happened? It's a very loaded question. From the behemoth perspective, a real behemoth, nothing happened. Like we said these last couple of days, why does a behemoth eat? Not because he wants to live, because he wants, he's hungry. And if it doesn't suffer hungry, then there's nothing happens. But the human being, even the sechel, the nefesh ha-naal, has a different perception of the world. The world is a reality, not the godly reality. The world is a reality because there's a godly order that gives it that reality. And therefore, the world should dissipate into nothingness. It's a tragic thought. It's unfortunate.
Because this true quality would be gone.
Yeah, it's impossible to fathom this. It's real. But it's not real because of my experience of it. Because I'm saying, no, you didn't experience its demise. So there's nothing happened. Nothing to do with my experience. It's a reality itself. I step out into the world. There is something very real beyond my experience. Where does that reality come from? In other words, what is his sense of it? Reality is godly. What is the meaning of reality? It's something that's real in and of itself. It does not need to be made. There is no existent and non-existent state. There's only one state. Reality is always real. You can be aware of it or not aware of it, but the reality itself is real. It cannot not be.
And the world somehow has that, even though it's a creation.
World has that not because of its mitzius, but because of the ha'or elikis that wants it to be. The reason we respect the world is because of the ha'or elikis that makes it, rather than because of the mitzius of the world. Like I say, the example of the clock on the wall. The clock on the wall does not represent a wall and a clock, but the human reality. And that you respect. You will not walk over to somebody's clock on the wall and say, I don't like it, it's not in the right place, let me just put it away. The clock doesn't care where it is. I'll put it in the closet. The clock doesn't care, the wall doesn't care, but there's something real that does care. That is the reality you experience when you visit somebody's home.
That's the ha'or elikis.
That's how it is. Which is ha'ara from a human being, a human ha'ara in a home. This is what makes the world real to the nefesh habamis. Why do we say that nefesh habamis senses the reality of the world? Because I said it's a nefesh, it's a human nefesh, and it has sechel, and it relates to things from a nefesh level, nefesh perspective, rather than from a animalistic and from a physical experience.
So if it has sechel and relates to reality, what's it lacking? Doesn't. So it sees things through.
It cannot relate to the God reality exclusively. It is through the materials of the world that relates to reality.
But he can relate to both the nefesh habamis. He can relate. He has the choice to relate to the mitzvahs itself without the ha'ura lekes, and he can relate to the ha'ura, to the main.
Okay. The answer to that is no. Because relating to the mitzvahs of the world itself is not a nefesh experience.
Then where is it coming from? People, doing it. So where does it come from?
They lose the nefesh experience.
And it's operated from which.
And then he's only reactive. He knows the world the same way as this diamond knows it. He's reactive.
He has no nefesh. He's just.
He's not relating on the nefesh. He's not relating to it as a reality. I better not go there so I don't get hurt. That's not reality.
But what is that? Where does it come from? He's a human being. He can be not a human being at all. He has that ability.
No. Human being is a human being. But he can ignore his human quality. This is what happened in our gracious world with all these science and all the wisdom, that human intellect is not real. The reality is that which you can experience with your body. Experiment, with you, and that. I don't want to go too far in this. It's going to be a waste of time. But no, the human being will never relate to it. Like I said many times. Quote unquote, scientifically, it has been concluded that the human being evolved from a monkey. Ask any human being who has studied this, who knows this scientific conclusion. Ask him, what do you think? Are you a monkey or a human being? He will say, I'm a human being, not a monkey. There's no similarity between me and the monkey. So he cannot become a monkey, but he can convince himself that that's the reality. As I said, the intellectual honesty. Intellectual honesty is intellectual stupidity. It's mamash synonymous. In other words, ignore the intellectual message, and then you become honest. Okay, did that answer your question? That's what we learn all the time, that really it's impossible for a yid to do an Aveda. Impossible. Because his whole reality is his godly awareness. In Odem Eber Avera, I'm ken nichts mehr Ruach Stus. That is what makes it possible. As a human being, as a Yefesh Abam is a human being, it's not possible. Because that's what makes the world real. What happens when a person does an Aveda? He's not thinking about the reality of the world. He's thinking about the experience of the world, not the reality of the world. Take a simple thing. A person steals money from somebody else. He senses himself. This is not real money. This is just the experience of it. The functional use of money. He will not consider himself a rich man because he stole a lot of money. A wealthy person has a different mentality. If one acquires wealth through theft, he doesn't have that sense, that experience. He's as poor as ever.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. We're talking about the avodah of the nefesh alakis, then the avodah of the nefesh abamis. Within the avodah of the nefesh alakis, we said the whole idea of ani avaya l'shanisi, that the elokus that is, that the world is really just elokus. The world is elokus. In terms of the avodah of the nefesh alakis, in other words, there's elokus that is the nekuda. Elokus is the only reality, and then there's the elokus that is already on the level that's gone through the tzimzum. Both the sensing of both of these is the nefesh alokis is okay. I'm going to try to rephrase my question. We're talking here about the nefesh bahamis only being able to relate to our alokis, but yet the nefesh alokis, we're also talking about sensing elokus already after the level of tzimtzum. So, what's the difference? And also, the second question is, you mentioned that in davening, you're basically putting the nefesh bahamis to sleep, and it's all avodah of the nefesh alakis. Whereas here, he's saying that the nefesh bahamis is in Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Hayadam Vayed, and it's also the avodah of Kriya Shema, V'chol nafshecha, v'chol miyadecha. This is also.
So then. The avodah of Baruch Shem Kavod Hayadam Vayed does not represent total unity with the Elokus. Okay, you know what? We'll discuss the second question. Let me first attend to the first question. The nefesh alakis also sees the world, and the world is after the tzimzum. So therefore, was it mean it says alakus only? So I'll explain it with one of the inyanim that we discuss, so to speak, the moshel element, because otherwise we're going in circles. We just mentioned theft. You should not steal. In stealing, from the worldly perspective, from Nefesh Abami's perspective, even if he understands that this is the Eibusher's world, the Eibusher said don't steal, and therefore don't steal. He sees it from the negative aspect of it. Don't steal because you're violating a certain reality, a certain principle. The Nefesh Elokis sees this at a different level. He sees this at the level, not that he's violating. It's not possible to violate. This is the godly reality. He doesn't have to say don't. Because he does not see the world state after the tzimzum, that there is a world. The world is that the way the Rebbe wants it. That's what the world is. The Rebbe wanted that this person should have this person should have this. And it's not a question of, and it's, since on the worldly level, that thing could be mine. It cannot be mine. You don't get things from the world. You get things directly from the Rebbe. Always, it says that Yaakov Avinu, he put himself in danger. Going back to fetch Pachim Ketani, small vessels that he left behind on the other side of the creek or the river, however it is, Marva What's that about? This is the Rebbe gave it to him. It is his obligation to have it and to use it. It was not a worldly perspective. Oh, I'm going to miss this spot. This is, yes, the tzaddik also sees the world, and the world is created to the tzimzum. But the tzimzum itself does not preclude the godly presence. So, there's much to speak about this.
And the Nefesh of Bahamas does see that you could get things from the world.
Yeah.
And it's just that there's a godly rule that is
That's right. The world is the world depends on the godly truth, and therefore you have to respect it.
But it's
and if you don't, then there's consequences. It's a completely different perspective. What? Sorry, there's something?
It is a good question. In describing the phenomenon of the initial kiss, why does the Rebbe use Lashon Shemevin Umagish in Hashem Echad? Isn't Umagish contradictory to the concept of Hashem Echad? Why use the term Magish? Magish implies there is a dichotomy of the reality of Elokis and the person. Hashem Echad would seem a different word would be appropriate than Magish. Magish implies that there's the essential truth and there's the person. So why Lashon Magish when it comes to speaking about the Nefesh Elokis?
The margish that he's referring to over here is not a hergish that's below the sechel, hergish of midas. This is the hergish of the nefesh of the hergish of the rotzen and oinen. That is his reality. That's the hergish he's talking about.
Is that being called sense? That kind of.
We translate it as sense because there is not a real experience. He senses that this is the truth, this is the reality. It's called margish. But that is not a hergish of an experiential type of hergish.
Is it with the Emunah type of experience, within the Emunah?
Yeah. It doesn't go through a process to get it, to have the baggage. This is his reality. This is the reality of the Nefesh Elokis. Okay, the important thing is that I wanted that we should have a clarity today is the Nefesh Bahamis. It's an amazing thing. It's a nefesh abamis, and he says the world is a mitzias. But how does it justify the mitzias of the world? This is what makes the world. This is how it justifies the mitzias of the world. This is why the world is a mitzias. Is this, so to speak, is this the normal way we think about it? Yes, this is the normal thing we think about. This is how the nefesh, even the nefesh abamis, this is how the nefesh abamis accepts the mitzias of the world.
Where does it get this perception from? In other words, what the initial perception of the nefesh elokis is elokus, and then from the top down, elokus then is manifest in the world that's below tzimzum. Nefesh bahamis,
The
its
initial
initial
perception of nefesh abamis and nefesh elokis are identical in that the reality is elokus, except that nefesh elokis sees elokus as the sole presence, the exclusive presence. Nefesh abamis sees, no, it's not the exclusive presence. That presence allows and brings about another kind of presence, a worldly presence, a mitzias. But if it is a real presence, it has to be from elokus.
The nefesh elokis doesn't know about the world.
Nefesh elokis knows about the world, but not as a separate presence from godliness.
Like not as a Metzias, like just,
Not as a mitzias,
just
right.
as light sees the world as not as a Metzias, as what?
As a godly will, as a godly presence.
Isn't it that the nefesh bahamis knows the world just like the scientists? You know, it experiences the world. So the nefesh bahamis comes into the person at birth and is experiencing all of these things. This is his primary reality, no?
No. He's experienced all these things, but what makes that experience real to him? In other words, in experience there are two parts. This is the experience effect that it has upon me. And then that experience tells me that there is something there. See, a behemoth, when it looks at a tree, doesn't see a tree as an entity. He sees it as an obstacle.
So for the nefesh bahamis, it's only a trigger that
It's a
activates
reality,
his
that's
like
right.
in a sechel basically.
That's right. This is why you say that he's also sechel. Sechel means that you know things because they belong, they're justified to be. What justifies anything to be? Only ha'or elokis. Only the primary reality. This is justifies that anything should be.
Ha'or elokis though is not creating the world. No, it's sort of governing the world. It's the rules by which the
No, ha'or elokis. This is after the tzimzum comes ha'or elokis, and that's what reflected in the world.
Can we also say the main thing by nefesh bahamis is the midos, and the sechel is sort of like explaining and
The sechel is for the sake of the midos. What makes the world? What is the meaning that it's a real world? And then there is ha'or elokis that's real. That he can live in it and he can experience it. He can enjoy life, so to speak. It's a real world. But it's a sechel that tells him that it's a real world. Otherwise, it's not a nefesh. It's not a human nefesh.
Rabbi Paltiel,
Yes, sir.
this what you said a few minutes ago that about stealing. That one view is that you don't steal because if you steal there are consequences. The other view is you can't steal. It's impossible to steal. So is this the voice or the perspective of the nefesh habahamis versus the nefesh halakis?
Yes.
The nefesh habahamis is always going to be involved with consequences. It's not an absolute thing for
Yeah,
him.
nefesh habahamis is involved in consequence. Involved on the worldly level. I once
And on
explained.
the worldly level is a level of where there are consequences and they matter.
That's right. In the world level, there's consequences because in the world, we once explained this. This we said like this. The whole phenomenon of stealing is possible only at the worldly level, because at the worldly level there are two people. Two people. Therefore, this one has this and this one has this. It's possible that one will steal from the other. But if you go up to a higher level, where there is only the godly reality that there is the godly will that there should be a world, and these two people represent exactly the same will. Each one has the godly will that he should be, not two separate entities. There, the whole phenomenon of stealing, there's only one thing. It's like a person stealing from himself.
On the other hand, these consequences, even though there's a view that there's consequences, this doesn't disturb what you're saying now, that still the nefesh habahamis understands that these consequences themselves, this is a ha'ara elokis.
Right. Okay, now,
It's not
please
just-
understand.
It's not merely social convention.
Right, okay. So, what is consequences? What is consequence mean? Consequence, social convention consequence, is not what we're talking about. That's a consequence. There is going to be a reaction. That's not the consequence that Godliness is concerned about. Consequence is that there is something disturbing the purity and the wholeness of the world. That's a consequence you're talking about. You have violated the truth of the world. I'm not talking about consequence. It's going to be a reaction and you're going to be thrown into jail. That's not a nefesh. That's not a human perspective.
That's like an animal getting hit with a stick.
Exactly. It's not a human perspective. The consequence we're talking about is, yes, it's possible to violate the truth of the world. That itself is unfathomable for the nefesh halakis. How can you violate? Huh?
For nefesh habahamis.
No, nefesh habahamis sees the consequence. Nefesh halakis doesn't see it's not possible to violate. It's the truth cannot be violated. It's only one thing.
And if it is violated, then how does the nefesh halakis? The nefesh halakis is shocked. I mean, what's going on? In other words,
This is a pretty high level nefesh habahamis.
No. This is a high. This is what's called the essence of nefesh habahamis. So the nefesh habahamis sees the world as a mitzias. Why? What gives the world? What? How can you accept the fact that there is a mitzias in the world? Because it's ha'ara elokis. It's a high level nefesh habahamis, but that is the human nefesh habahamis. Please understand what we're talking about. This is what's called the human nefesh habahamis. A human means that primarily he sees that there is a truth to things. They exist because they have to be. There is a true basis for their existence.
Does a goy's nefesh habahamis match up to this?
The Goy's nefesh habahamis, like we discussed over this weekend, Goy's habahamis is in a different category. But nevertheless, even a Goy's nefesh habahamis, in a Goy also has sechel. And the sechel focuses, tells you that what is worthwhile, what is the reality in the world, is the spiritual element. But it's a spiritual element within the worldly context. In other words, like we said, The guy wants to eat so that he will live. But where would he live? He will live in the world. Ayid wants to eat so that he will live. But where will he live? He'll live in the God reality. It's a different kind of life.
Even the nefesh habahamis.
Even I'm sure, because that's what makes it real. The Ha'ora Elikis. But if not, if he loses sight of the great Malchus, the Malchus of Shemayim, then he loses himself.
In Tanya we talk about a battle between the Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Bahamas. So like I'm saying Halavai and Nefesh Bahamas. So what's the battle?
You're absolutely right. Because we are, this is the consequence, this is the result of all the stupidities that have been fed as a reality. Like I point out, a very simple illustration that we always experience. Like I experienced it in my own home when the children were growing up. A little infant, you feed him with a spoon. He refuses to eat otherwise than through a spoon. Why not? It's a food. There has to be through a spoon. And he struggles with it and he makes a mess, but that's what he wants. Why? Because he loses. That's the way a human being is supposed to eat. What do you think? I'm a cat? I'm a human being.
This idea of not disturbing the divine will, and you're saying that this actually is this is the consequence that the Nefesh HaBahamis is worried about. Sometimes you also speak about, like, I don't know, it seems to me very similar to what sometimes you describe as the essence of Iyar Shemayim. He doesn't want to disturb the purity of the Lakus. Is it not the same thing, right?
All right, I'll tell you about it. I have to think into exactly what you're referring to. I don't want to...
okay.
I want to stick. I want to have to make a little bit of a limit. You come in, and you come into shul, and the people are all sitting, and your seat is in the middle someplace, and you have to disturb the people to let you in. And it bothers you that it is. I hope so, that you have to disturb the people. What bothers you? That the people will become angry at you, that you're disturbing them? What bothers you when you have to come in and disturb the people from their seats?
They're settled, and you're going to disturb them. And
You're disturbing. You're dividing them. Something real is happening, and you're disturbing it. It's not the consequence. It's not the reaction. You can say, I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm sorry. 100%, it doesn't do anything. All right. Okay, let's look inside again. Avedon of the Nefesh HaBahamis is in this posuk that's expressed in this posuk, the Inyan that's expressed in Oroch Shem. What's expressed in this posuk? That there is a Malchus. Shem Malchus, and the Shem Malchus is something which is Baruch, which is glory, and it has to be respected to the extreme. It's in the respect of a melech. That is what's respected, what's reflected in the shame in the world. That the world is in the state of Metzius. What means Bechinas Metzius? Bechinas Metzius means it can be identified as a presence. You see the world. And how is the world Bechinas Metzius? Metzius is a lie. No. it is due to the fact that there is ha'or elikis that comes to the tzimzum. Shelagabei ha'or zu ha'olam tevesmok. And relative from this perspective of this ha'or, the world is a mitzvah, is a reality. Because this ha'or, as we said, this is not the etzem holocaust, this is the effect of holocaust. And Lagabe, this ha'or, the world is a mitzvah. But this mitzvah has a ha'or elikis. And therefore this mitzvah, you're not considering the world only from a worldly perspective. Am I destroying something? Or am I doing something else that I have to be punished for? No. You respect it as a ha'or elikis, as a godly reality. But it's only ha'or elikis. It's a mitzvah. It's possible to disturb it, possible to disrupt it, but you respect it, you don't want to disrupt it. That's meant oil mitzvahs and mitzvahs. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I wanted to ask, you mentioned before that the nefesh elokis sees, there's no possibility of going against the godly truth. But when it in fact happens, what is the effect on the nefesh elokis? I mean, is it say, I mean, it's an impossibility happening. How does the nefesh elokis react to this?
Could I add something? Because the question would be, because the nefesh elokis is really not involved. He never believes in them.
So nefesh elokis. This is the Torah helps the nefesh elokis to maneuver around the hell of the world, and it says like this: if you steal, the object that you stole remains under the ownership of the original owner. But then the Torah provides for a means to restore the wholeness of the world. How do you restore? Okay, so I disrupted it. What am I doing to restore this whole? He's still the owner, but it's in my possession. What do I do now? It's important to understand there are many mitzvahs in the Torah. There is do's and don'ts, and then when there is don'ts, there is it says if you do this to correct it. For example, if you steal, return the object. Now that we have gone into this returning of the object is not simply because you caused the other person a hazard. Returning the object means restore, correct the imbalance, correct the impurity that you caused. Because the object really belongs to him. The klal in the Torah is that if there's a lav that has a kumasei, that has a nittikle acid, that has an acid to which you can correct a lav, it's like this. As long as you still have had the opportunity to do the acid, to correct it, there's no punishment. If you lost the opportunity of doing the acid, then you get malchus, because you didn't avail it.
What does the malchus help the nefesh elokis?
The malchus is the lowest level of punishment in the world to bring to true tshuva. Tshuva helps upon everything. And which is the means of Malchus. But that is the last resort. But it's an interesting thing that as long as he still has the object, he can return it. There's no Malchus. Why? But he stole it. Because it still can be restored back to its norm, to its health.
Maybe this could be a beer on curries.
What?
Maybe this could be a beer on curries. Where there's a piece of curries, so the nefesh alakis can't relate to. So Nichras no longer has a relationship with this.
Kodesh Rahman Sanders, that's his. The point which I'm trying to make is that, like it says always, we always need to have the cloud. The punishment in the Torah is not a punishment. It is to correct the blemish that is persistent. To restore the world to its wholesome, godly state.
I'll drop it, but I still am not understanding. You said it from the nefesh alakis perspective. It's impossible to not have this purity, right? But yet.
So nefesh alakis perspective. If this is your object and I took it, wherever I go, it's still yours. Still yours.
Nothing happened from the nefesh alakis perspective.
That's right. It's still yours. Nothing happens. You can then affect a real crime, but you can no longer return it.
And then still nothing happened by the nefesh alakis? In other words, it's impossible not to, or it recognizes that there are crimes
all right.
that.
I see what's bothering me. Yes, restored, so you violated. But the point is this: you can violate God's world, you can violate God's presence itself. In order to case you violating God's presence. It's not the world per se. I once explained here, it's an interesting thing, that it says, al ponai. What's meant al ponai? The violation is the fact that it's al ponai, it's in the presence, in the godly presence, that's what you're doing. It's not the deed itself.
All the averas are basically violating the ha'ara elokis. Only very few situations would actually violate the presence. Right?
Right. That's how we do so. All right. So the nefesh alakis is a wonderful thing, but for us, as you said, Halabai Nefesh Abanis, it behooves us really to understand what a human being is at the level that we can really understand. We should remember. That's what a human being is. There's a sechel, and if you examine your own thoughts, you examine the human phenomenon, that is exactly the truth. I give you an example. You come in, people are sitting, you have to disturb them. No excusing will make it easier for you to do it. Usually what happens, that the disturber feels worse than the people who are being disturbed. That's a common experience. By them, it's an insignificant thing. They disturb the gashmis, but he disturbs the whole ruchnius reality, the whole respect. Like we said, respect. You know, a person. What hurts a person more? Disrespect, or an insult, or an embarrassment, or a patch. What hurts a person more? I have not yet come anybody saying that a patch hurts more. A dog, absolutely. That's the only thing that bothers him. Just as an aside, I have to just come to my mind, so I mention it. In the home, your family, every member of the family, the most important thing is the show of respect. It is not physical service that we do. That's also important, but the most important thing is the show of respect. That is when you have a human relationship. When you talk about, let's say, help in the house, to help out, you know, sometimes the woman has all kinds of, you know, there are different periods and all kinds of burdens coming from all sides, and the kids and whatever it is, it could be really disturbing to the point where you don't have a moment to breathe. So you come out to help. This help is way beyond the help that you actually give. It is a recognition of respect. Hey, how can I watch this type of situation? That is more important than the actual help. Just as an aside. The same thing on the other side. And the husband is struggling with parnasa, and the woman goes and spends indiscriminately. That's also the most important part of it, is the lack of respect rather than the money that's spent.
What did the husband do? I missed that part.
That one was for the wives.
Which one? The second part or the first part?
Just before this.
Just before this, the husband joins in just to give the message that he recognizes and he is concerned about the burden that she has, even though he cannot really help it. And what he helps is into reality relative to what's going on. But just the respect is more important. We say it in davening all the time. So we shouldn't be hurt. Lo nevoish. We shouldn't be embarrassed. All the time. And you say, what kind of thing is this? Embarrassing. It's a big deal. That's more important to human being than anything.
This relates to the Baruch Shem Rei Malchusai.
Yes. Now that you mentioned it, to correlate it directly, it's important to understand. The whole principle of respect, of human respect, is a recognition that this human being is a godly creature. It's real. We're not talking about artificial respect. We're talking about real respect. Why is it real respect? Because it's a godly creature. The godly spirit that he represents.
In yesterday's Chumash, so Hakoi is B'chaim and Flolo is Afla Harnisis. Hakoi, Make is
Right.
B'chaim and Flolo is Afla Harnisis.
All right. Like you said, Halavai Nefesh Abahamis. Halavai, these human beings are the Nefesh Abahamis, a true Nefesh Abahamis. His boy okay, we have a few minutes. I just want to. Okay, I'm glad we did this, whatever time it took. His boynus bozeh, the his boynus that is possible, that takes place bozeh in this level, in this reality, where the Nefesh Abahamis recognizes the mitzi, that the world is a mitzias, and it's a mitzias because of the ha'or elikis. That's it. Then there is avoida. Avoida, this is the way the Nefesh Abahamis thinks of Hatchil. Then there is avoida. Avoida means, the principle of avoida is to bring greater clarity and greater permeation of the godly element versus the worldly element. That is to the hisboinus. The hisboinus in this is eich. He is misboinen in the fact that in every creature yesh oir v'chayes elikia hamchayo isoy. There is an oir and chayes elikia that gives it life. In other words, you're looking at this nivro, and what do you notice? What do you see? And what is it this nivro represent? It represents the oir v'chayes elikia, the godly chayes. This is what makes a nivro real. And he actually focuses, as we explained the other day, eich. Not that he tells him logically that this is how it is up his sechel, up his logic, but he focuses in on this reality. He looks at the nivra and says, "Hey, this is elokus. This is the chayes elikim.
That comes from the Nefesh Abahamis.
This is his bonus in Nefesh Abahamis.
So the whole avoida is, which a person has, is only from the Nefesh Abahamis, because the Nefesh Elokis has it anyway. So the only question is on the Nefesh Abahamis.
No. Nefesh Elokis has also avoid, but halavai Nefesh Abahamis.
This is a mitzvah. This is bonanus, and this mamali comment is a mitzvah. We usually say that ideas for Torah and all these things. This is mitzvah Nefesh Elokis, no?
There is definitely avoid for Nefesh Elokis.
No, what I'm saying, if a person's being misbonen on Inyan Eloki,
no,
that's a mitzvah. You say usually that.
Yes, if Nefesh Elokis has avoid, it definitely has avoid. Just to give us a kind of a sense, avoid the Nefesh Elokis. If the Nefesh Elokis has a desire to be nichlen elokus, leave the body. So So for him, the avodah is eat a bagel and putter and stay where you are. You know the story, right? Malach, not November. That's the avodah. To bring things to the matter and to revive the world and bring. Okay, but there is definitely a way. But for our purposes, why we can understand, but we're going to discuss in the next few lines the hisbonus of the nefesh habahamis. That is. Both. It is something which we can understand, and it is imperative that we do. And this we will have to do next session.
If everyone could stay around, who's able to stay around.